them are also available to the passerby in the street as questions in 3 languages, in Hindi, in Marathi, and in English, which greet people on the banners outside. I also want to briefly say about part 2 that as you transit from one mezzanine to the other, and as you're revolving these questions, you will come to a point where there is a sudden opening up of social space and of the colleagues that we brought into the architects we brought into our process. Rusha actually created what might be at one level called furniture, but which strikes me very strongly as being a kind of social sculpture, because it is dispersed across the body of the exhibition and it can be used in different ways. And in 2C, as we like to think of it, you will come into a space that we think of as the forum. And that is where screenings take place, informal conversations might happen, and you might just rearrange this social sculpture and use it for the purposes of taking debate forward. And so this sweep of 2 will take you from Corbusier, from the great moment of the Nehruvian state, from the consensus about what architecture was going to do in terms of propelling forward a language of modernity and of internationalism, through to a breaking up of this consensus, an opening up of alternatives, a turning of architects away from the nation-building project to an engagement with vernaculars, with a critical sense of what the region could offer, and what kinds of alternative practices might in fact be explored. So that's the kind of enormous opening up and dispersal, if you will, of architectural practices that takes place in that section. Back for the rotunda.
Thanks, Ranjit. So the final level is within what we call the dome or the rotunda, and that's actually the moment or the time within which we stand today. I think any one of us who has attempted to sort of write or create or engage with a discursive space or space on architecture has realized the challenges of the moment when you try to talk and describe the time that you occupy. And that's the time period that we talk about in this last level, where for various reasons, political, the way markets opened up, the way materials sort of flourished the architecture of the building industry market, the way real estate booms, the way urbanization shifts have happened, it has literally left all of us, including practitioners, in a certain kind of a dizzy state as to how do we make sense of today. One way in which we engage with making sense of today is to take a certain kind of a historical overview. You try to understand a certain kind of a historical structure which has produced the today. In another sense was to sort of also shift the gear which one discussed in talking about the state or the sense of the profession at this level. But at another level, it was essentially to engage with a set of buildings that are produced in this time period, which are literally produced in the last 20 years. It's difficult to sort of take a call on 20 years of architecture, which have just been here in a sense immediate yesterday, and to produce a certain kind of a thesis. But you surely can produce a series of questions. You surely can produce a series of ideas which can be debated and discussed. In a sense, as one of the early interviews that we did, thankfully with Mustansir Dalvi, is literally titled "Without the Benefit of Hindsight." And in that sense, how do we engage, or what will be our indices, what will be our points on a particular map through which we will enter into the space of discussion or conversation on architecture that is produced today, without getting into a rant of there is no architecture today, there is bad architecture today, past was good, this was bad, without getting into those rants, but literally treating the third floor or the third level as a laboratory of ideas, as a laboratory of conversations. And that's where precisely the sort of the paper installation, the paper sculpture which Rahul sort of mentioned and discussed in the beginning, also plays a particular role. It has a certain sense of a tentativeness, and it is also that tentativeness of today, and works that are produced today, and ideas that are produced today, and buildings that are produced today, they occupy a tentative space. And I think as a fraternity of architects, we will have to accept that today we are in a tentative space. And what we do with this tentative space is absolutely important, and that's where an exhibition like this is essential, because it is trying to engage with the tentativeness rather than declaring any sort of a thesis or a clear sensibility.
So after that, we are all going to need refreshments. These are going to be served on the terrace, but I'm going to take a minute to just conclude this part of the inauguration. And I just want to sort of state, in addition to what has been said, that there are three major levels in terms of scale that we are engaging here. Institution like, well, the Ministry of Culture and the National Gallery of Modern Art, Mumbai, it's a national level institution, and therefore we are engaging with questions at the national level. Clearly, this is about the state of architecture in India. So in terms of scale, that's the meta scale. The second is we are dealing, and UDRI is very much a partner. UDRI is concerned about the city of Mumbai. So the next scale of our concern is the city of Mumbai. And we are all, as architects, grappling with practicing in a place like this. And so it's very much pointed, and it's really one of our aspirations, which I would make quite explicit, that we need to make Mumbai the center of the discussion of architecture. It has the potential, it has the intellectual capital. We are very proud of our community of architects, so it's very much about Mumbai. And the third is the scale of the Kala Ghoda Association, because that has also been our supporter, which you could call the neighborhood scale. And as part of the Kala Ghoda Association, there's the Prince of Wales, of the Chhatrapati Shivaji Museum now with Mr. Mukherjee. They've all been part of the association. It's going to be a venue for many occasions, debates and conferences. Marg Magazine, that has been part of the core group. In fact, they've done an anthology on architecture based on past issues, which I hope will be released during the period of these 3 months. So there is another operation, which is this localized operation, where we want to demonstrate that the Kala Ghoda area too, as cultural infrastructure, can be activated more than a week into 3 months, and we worked together with the Kala Ghoda Association to do that. So again, my many thanks to everyone, people who came to help us inaugurate the exhibition, to all of you for being part of it, and on behalf of the Ministry of Culture, the NGMA Mumbai, the UDRI, and my co-curators, we welcome you to enjoy the exhibition, and we declare it formally open. Thank you very much for being here. Firoza Godrej, who is the ex-chairperson of the NGMA, not an architect, but she's the one who supported this project at its inception. And herself has done wonderful exhibitions, and she serves on the board of several social and cultural institutions in Mumbai, and has done a lot for the cultural life of the city. Mr. Bolakar, who is the chairperson of NGMA, may I now ask you and Mr. Kenneth to also please stand. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to now call upon Ranjit and Kaivan to share with you the structure of the exhibition. I was just talking to them, and we are all a bit overwhelmed with the number of people here. And so what we have promised as a walk through the exhibition is going to be logistically difficult. So instead, I think what they'll share with you is the structure of the exhibition and allow you to then, at your ease, look at things. And we are going to do several guided tours through the 3 months of this exhibition. We'll announce them, and it'd be wonderful if some of you came back, and we'd be happy to engage with you in much more detail. So I'm going to hand it over to Ranjit and to Kaivan.
Thanks, Rahul. Thank you all for being here for this opening. The exhibition, I'll jump into the structure of the exhibition right away. It's a 3-tier structure. So there's a sandwich kind of a structure with a central portion that itself is again divided into 3 areas. I'll try and describe the beginning structure, which is where all of us are standing and occupying this space right now. I think one of the attempts in this exhibition was to sort of look essentially at the ecosystem within which architecture functions. So as much as we constantly speak about architecture, There was at one level to look at the profession, the idea of a profession as well as the idea of a profession. And the other thing that we have tried to explore in this exhibition is also the role of the architect. Not the architect as a shining figure that stands out, but as an architect who essentially through his job as an architect engages with the space of society, culture, and essentially politics. And I think this has been a key concern for all of us, which also was a driving force for the research that you see at many levels, but also which became some kind of a guideline for our research team to progress when we were trying to work with things. One simple way that we sort of worked is what we have also titled one of our section called Profession Through Numbers. And that was very, very essential that when you look at a profession and when we talk of an ecosystem, there is the conversation about an education system that produces the professional, that produces the architect. There is a whole space within which, for example, architecture functions. There are questions about design, but there are also questions about real estate. There are also questions about patronage. There are also questions about the social structure within which architecture produces itself. A simple question as to what do architects do with housing. At the same time, how do architects engage with the public space through public institutions? On the other hand, there was also a question as to the production of the intellectual knowledge within which architecture functions, which essentially comes through the area of publications, whether it is books, whether it is monographs, whether it is magazines. So in that sense, what you see on this floor is a certain kind of a segregation of various corners where some of these questions are raised and picked up. For example, just the two maps that you see behind me are essentially two moments within which this exhibition is focused, and it simply looks at the growth of urbanization with the growth of essential or the important or the large practices in the country and the growth of the number of schools that have taken place in this country. One of the figures suggests literally that within the next 5 years, the number of students will outnumber the number of registered architects that stand today within the Council of Architecture. Also looking at professional bodies like essentially the Council of Architecture, the Indian Institute of Architects, etc. The next series of exhibition, the next series of levels within this exhibition, as I said, are within a three-tier structure themselves, and I would request Ranjit to talk about them.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you all for being here this evening with us. It's a very, very special occasion for all three of us, Rahul, Kevan, and me, because over the years, there's much that we have done in this quarter. And I have to recall that it was really Rahul Mehrotra and Sharda Dwivedi who came up with, many years ago, the notion that this could well be a special precinct devoted to culture and that could act as an arts quarter. In some sense, that notion has now been embedded and naturalized, if you will. But we have to remember that it did not always exist. And it's really through the coming together of different kinds of cultural practitioners and, frankly, all of us present here this evening that this quarter or this precinct achieves its energy and its meaning. Something that I would like to also say about this exhibition, building off of this, is that it marks the convergence of people and ideas that have been in play for a number of years. With Rahul, for instance, this journey goes back nearly 25 years when we were meant to work on an anthology journal called Yatra, which then mutated into a set of adventures with the UDRI, including a one-day symposium on alternative practices. With Kevan, it's been the better part of the last decade with a very strong emphasis on the attempt to revive cultural institutions, which again reminds me of the very special nature of this occasion, because this quarter is marked off between the CSMVS, the NGMA, and the Jahangir Art Gallery, each with its own very, very particular history of intervention and formation of culture for this city. So, to focus on part two, the three mezzanines that many of you are in fact in right now, if part one takes the form of a critical survey or a report or a stock taking of the profession, in part two we segue into a more historical survey and engagement of what Indian architecture did across this long period from 1947 to 1991. So the exhibition is mapped in relation to what strike us as three major historical events: independence, the emergency, and liberalization. In each case, our concern is with the relative proximity or distance of the architect from the state as patron, and with larger social and cultural ideas. To what extent were architects part of the nation-building project is one of the key questions we ask in part 2 of the exhibition. How did that relationship embed itself in a larger culture in terms of institutions, in terms of symbols with which people could identify themselves? And how, over those 4.5 or 5 decades, did that relationship between architects and the state unravel in a certain way? Those are some of our concerns. And as you go up, you will find that our main operational tools, if you will, are text and the judicious use of images. A number of our friends, including, well, also relatives, family members, were a bit surprised that we had no models at all in this exhibition. And I have to say that for the three of us, this was a conscious decision. The idea, if you will, was that the exhibition should focus on these interrelationships. It should focus on the ideational stratum of architecture. We did not want objects to be fetishized. We did not want to draw attention to something that might be more aesthetic than conceptual, and we wanted this really to be the emphasis. At each point in the exhibition, you will find that there are timelines, a fine old Eamesian device, which helps orient whatever is going on in Indian architecture at the time to what might have been happening in the domain of political action. Were there schisms in the state? Was regionalism on the rise? Was the sense of a nation state breaking up at certain points? These are the kinds of interrelationships that we would like